Fun times in Cleveland again.
Still Cleveland.
Come on down to Cleveland town, everyone. Under construction since 1868. See our river that catches on fire. It's so polluted that all our fish have AIDS. We see the sun almost 3 times a year. This guy has at least 2 DUIs. The flats look like a Scooby-Doo ghost town. Don't slow down in East Cleveland or you'll die. Our economy's based on LeBron James. Buy a house for the price of a VCR. Our main export is crippling depression. We're so retarded that we think this is art. It could be worse though, at least we're not Detroit. We're not Detroit.
Welcome to another episode of the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast. I'm Justin Mason, and that music tells you that Dave McDonald is back on the show, and he's on the show for good, so you're going to be hearing this week in and week out. Dave, how you doing, my friend?
I'm pumped, man. I don't know if I'm more pumped to hear that song every week or to be working with you, but definitely pumped regardless. And, it's always great to work with your friends, and especially ones that you have good chemistry with, and I can't wait to get into this with you. I think it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. You and I think, have some good chemistry, and I think we see eye to eye on some things, and we won't see eye to eye on other things, which will be even more fun.
Exactly.
Yeah, so this will be a lot of fun. I hope you're ready for the heat, because I'm not going to let you off the hook in the way that maybe your buddy Jake lets you off the hook. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire.
Yeah, I am actually looking forward to that. I don't think it's that he lets me off the hook so much as I think because he kind of learned from me, we kind of agree on more things than most people would in this industry working together. So I think it'll be good to get some pushback from you. And I like the way that you do things. I like the way that you disagree with people, because it's respectful, but we never take it personally or anything. So I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And I don't know how many disagreements will be tonight. We're going to talk about some September strategies. Like, it's the end of the season, right? We've got 4 more weeks, not even technically 4 more weeks, 3 weeks, right. I guess, now at this point left. And there are people who are fighting for playoff spots or in the playoffs in head-to-head leagues. There are people who are trying to wrap up championships or get themselves into the money in roto leagues. And I think this is the time of the year where even some diehards fall off a little bit, right? Some people who are really into fantasy baseball because football's starting, right? Football literally, his opening night is on Thursday, and people will lose a little bit of attention. So I think this is a time where you can catch up a little bit and push yourselves a little bit higher in those standings. So we're going to talk about a lot of the ways that you especially have come up with to make yourself competitive at the end. But first, let's just jump into some news and notes. Charlie Morton signed a 1-year, $20 million extension to stay in Atlanta. This is surprising. I thought this was kind of the last go-around for Charlie Morton, but apparently he's going to give it one more shot, 1 more year. Where do you think Charlie Morton's going to be kind of coming in next year in terms of ADP?
Yeah, and for future references on this show, I am never gonna. Every time you ask me for ADP, I'm never gonna have an answer for you, because you do these like early drafts. I'm not like ready with ADP until at least like February or January at least. So I don't know, but I will say he is still looking really good. As someone who has him in one of my most important leagues, the Super League, I watch a lot of his starts to make sure everything's looking good. The curve looks great. The velo's still there. So, I mean, it's a lot of money, and we thought that maybe Atlanta might ride him until the wheels fall off this year, and then he would retire, because he was talking about retiring last year even.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? He's still got it. So why not keep doing it? He'll come with a little bit of risk because he'll be, I think, 38 next year? I believe.
Yeah, it's right around there.
Yeah, but I mean, hey, Scherzer's still pitching well. I think Morton's stuff translates pretty well still until he starts falling off. I think we got to keep going back to him.
I wish he was a guy who'd gotten more shares of kind of in 2021, because I was a little afraid coming off of, some late season struggles last year. He was, got injured late in the season last year, pitched well in the playoffs. And so maybe I should have kind of let a lot of that stuff go. But I really should have thought about the fact that, hey, they are just going to ride him. He's going to rack up innings as long as he's healthy. And then if he gets injured, just drop him anyway. So Good on you. Good on other people who went after Charlie Morton because he's been really, really good this year.
Yeah, he comes with like I said, he came with some risks, but for where I could get him in drafts, I knew that he had the potential to kind of be like not a top tier ace, but like that secondary tier ace, which I value a lot. So I think the risk was worth taking.
Do you think where do you think he's going to be kind of in your initial ranks when you think about it for next year? So obviously you don't know where the ADP is going to be, but we've got a guy asking, how do you feel about drafting Morton for next year? I don't have a problem with drafting Morton. As long as he finishes the season healthy, I think he can do exactly what he's done this year, which is rack up a ton of innings that are very, very useful, in a division that doesn't really scare me. So like, I think he could be like a sneaky SP3 next season.
Oh yeah. I guess I was thinking you'd have to take him higher than that, but maybe not. I think
his age will scare people off.
Maybe. And speaking as someone who age scares me off when you're talking about a first or second round pitcher, but if you can get him, if I were just to guess right now, I would think he'd maybe like fourth round, maybe for him.
Oh wow, that's way higher than I would have thought.
No, you're thinking lower, really?
I was thinking like fifth, sixth, maybe even seventh round.
Oh my lord!
Like I thought he was going to be going like in the area like where Gosman and stuff was going this last year.
For this year, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I think if you can get him there, I think that's. Jesus, the dude has a 1.06 WHIP, 3.47 ERA, and all the estimators kind of back that up too. Like he's still striking out guys at a high clip, 10.5 K per nine, sub 3 walk per nine. He struggled a bit at times with walks, but nothing too bad. And now that he's on a competitive team, I don't know. I would personally be shocked if he was going later than like the fifth round. But I love him in that spot as an SP3. That's a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up my current SP ranks for rest of the season. I have him rest of the way. I have him as my number 16 starting pitcher.
Okay,
so,
yeah, I was gonna say definitely top 20, somewhere in that like 12 to 20 range for me.
Yeah, I just wonder like how many guys like Shane McClanahan, Alton Manoah, like the younger talent that people get really, really excited about, end up getting pushed up over a guy who's going to be in his late 30s and we thought was going to retire last season. Right?
Yeah, so. And I am huge on McClanahan, so if it's like 1 versus 1, I might go McClanahan. But I could foresee a possibility of getting both of them, honestly. Like I love those guys with that. He's got the velocity and he's got the secondaries to play off of it to get those strikeouts, and they both pitch for good teams, so you should be getting plenty of wins too.
Yeah. Let's move on and talk about the world's worst sitcom, which is Everybody in Boston Has COVID. Like, if this was happening in April, these games would have been shut down, right? Because I think they're on like 8 or 9 guys now that have tested positive and had to hit the IL.
My God. Yeah, it's bad.
So what are you doing with guys like this? Like, Pivetta hits the IL. Like, I dropped him in one league, kept him in another. Like, I didn't even know how do you even approach this right now? Xander Bogaerts, who was like a second-round pick for a lot of people and has been pretty damn good this year on the IL COVID. Like, how are you handling these late-season COVID cases?
How can you? You gotta figure out, is it did they test positive? Do they have symptoms? Or is it just like, because sometimes this is vaccine side effects, sometimes it's a false positive. So we have to figure out, is this something that's going to keep them out long term, or are they going to be back like a couple days later, or within a week? So it sucks. It sucks that we're living in a time where we even have to worry about this. Like, on top of everything else, on top of injuries and, just the crazy world that is fantasy baseball, they have to try to keep up with COVID is just ridiculous too. It's unfortunate. I don't know. What are you doing to keep up with it?
I'm just kind of trying to find out like any information I can, like you said, right? You have to figure out, is this vaccine side effects? Is this an exposure? Did they test positive? Are they symptomatic? If they test positive, that's automatically 10 days. We're on September 6th. Which means 10 days is September 16th, which means you only get maybe another 10 days left in the season after that, right? At best. Yeah. If someone tests positive, they're done as far as I'm concerned. I'm dropping them off my team. I don't care who they are.
I would say especially if it's a pitcher, because, pitchers still have to ramp back up. A hitter you could put back in your lineup ostensibly pretty quickly, but Outside of, your studs like Xander Bogaerts, yeah, I mean, Pavetta's an easy drop, I think. If you got kind of those fringe guys, yeah, you let them go and you move on, because the number one thing to do right now is not take zeros. You don't want to have a whole bunch of, some people play in leagues with IL slots, and if you do, that's fine. You can throw them on an IL slot. But those of us who don't, like in NFBC, we have to make those tough decisions. We have to decide, okay, I got to move on. And you don't want to sacrifice current production for the possibility that, hey, maybe this guy might come back in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I completely agree. Even if you play in leagues with IL spots, most of your IL spots are probably already full because it's been that kind of year. So, AJ Pollock, speaking of IL spots, he is going to be out for a little while with a grade 2 hamstring strain. If you were watching the game, and I was watching the game when this happened because it was the Giants-Dodgers, it was really ugly. The slide was ugly. His reaction to hurting it was really ugly. I thought he might have broken his ankle. He seemed to be in so much pain. I think you can pretty safely drop him. I don't think he's making it back, and if he is, it's going to be really, really late in the season.
Yeah, I mean, even if it was grade 1, I probably would have dropped him. I only had him in one league, and I moved on immediately. And that was a league that I had IL slots in, so I could have waited a day to put him on my IL, and I didn't even wait that day because I'm like, if it's a grade 2 strain, even if he comes back, it might be with a week left, and it's just not worth. You need to replace him as soon as possible. I'd rather not miss out on someone that I can replace him with today than wait till tomorrow to replace him. So, yeah, in cases like that, like hamstring, soft tissue injuries, any kind of arm injuries for pitchers, shoulder, those are things that I'm moving on from immediately. It's only kind of the more mild things, that I'm willing to wait out, and that's only if the team assures me, hey, this is only going to be a minimum 10-day stint. It's precautionary, blah, blah, blah. So other than that, I'm moving on.
According to Yancey, we need matching RotoWare shirts.
Oh.
Yeah, you got to buy something from the Justin Mason collections.
That's true. So we're both going to be wearing Justin Mason shirts? Is that what we're going to do?
I mean, that's what I have. Unless you want to buy the Cedric Mullins shirt. I've got maybe 4 or 5 other ones, but I got about 30 Justin Mason shirts. So
maybe what we can do is we can send you a Rotosaurus shirt and you can send me a Justin Mason shirt.
I like this idea.
Yeah.
There we go. I like this. This is this seems like it's
cross promotion,
Yeah.
Really. So,
I like those Rotosaurus shirts. Actually, I want a mug. I want to get a mug for my office. So.
I mean, we have them available. Who doesn't like dinosaurs, right?
I'll even buy it myself. Yeah, of course people like dinosaurs. I mean, and then your boy Spectre says Dave isn't wearing pants. I'm not wearing pants either. It is literally 97 degrees in my office right now. I am sweating bullets, not because I'm nervous working with Dave, but just because it's hot as fuck in here. So I'm wearing shorts, and if I could take off any more clothes and not be afraid that Twitter would ban my account, I would.
Have you gotten any warnings yet? I mean, you've worn a lot of very revealing clothing before on Twitter. I can't imagine that you not wearing pants would be much different.
Funny enough, I had my account suspended 3 times while I was on vacation.
Recently?
Yeah, dude. When I went on vacation during the All-Star break, I had my account suspended 3 times for copyright infringement for tweets I had done 6-8 months before that. Yeah, where I use music from artists that I didn't have permission to use. All of a sudden, they started cracking down. All of a sudden, I'm on vacation. I can't even use Twitter really because I'm in the middle of fucking nowhere, and I'm getting these notifications from Twitter your account has suspended because of this copyright. What the hell is going on? Who's tweeting from my account? But apparently, I used the Sarah McLachlan song that the animal shelter.
Yeah,
ACS. Oh yeah, I did it for a bunch of Cedric Mullins things.
So they have no problem with your mankini and your thongs and Olympic wear, but copyright infringement, now we've got problems. Okay.
Apparently, that is the world we live in.
Jake and I actually used a WWE entrance theme song as our original High Stakes Heat on our first episode. We used that as our opening song,
Mhm.
and they suspended our account immediately. So we're like, okay, I guess we have to find something that was like freely shared or whatever. So that's how we came up with what we currently have. But yeah,
Well,
I
I
don't
will
know.
continue to use this theme song until we get suspended.
No, Mike Polk will never file a copyright infringement against you for using that. I know how he is, and he's very much he'd be a fan of it. So maybe I'll let him know too, since he's a Cleveland boy.
And then we're getting some just random shout outs in the chat. We are live for those of you listening later on YouTube or on the podcast version of this. You can join us 10 p.m. Eastern every Monday. We're going to be doing this. Let's move on to our next injury. That's Willie Adames hits the IL. This seems like it's been a long time coming. He's been dealing with this quad injury for quite a while. Are you dropping Willie Adames because he has been absolutely money this year?
Yeah, so this one hits close to home because Tony and I have him in the main event, and we struggled with this decision, and I was away for the weekend too, so I was kind of like, for a wedding in another state, and I didn't really have time to do fab like I normally do. I tried to make a list before I left, and then the Adames news kind of happened while I was gone, and so we kind of talked about it a bit, and we decided to hold on to him based on the comments that we were reading, but he could very well end up being a drop next week. It's so hard to move on from him. Like you're saying, like he's been an absolute stud for us this year. It's tough to move on from guys like that. But quads, soft tissue stuff, it's definitely concerning.
Yeah, I think especially with the fact that the Brewers have a playoff spot pretty much wrapped up, and we'll talk about this more in depth here in a little bit, that I think they're going to be really careful with him. And so I would actually be okay dropping him especially in your 10 and 12s. 15s, It's so hard because there's just very, very few people out there. Thank
you for clarifying. When I'm usually and I need to remember to correct myself on this, but I'm almost always speaking from the point of view of 15 teamers because that's my specialty. But I do play some 12s as well, and in a 12 where you don't have an IL slot, I think it's fine to move on because you probably can get a pretty productive player in there. But like you were saying, in the deeper leagues in the 15s, it's so difficult to drop him when the guy you're adding is like a
Matt Duffy.
Yeah, like I really can't bring myself to drop Adames for Matt Duffy. So.
And J Hook is reminding you that fab is more important than weddings, Dave.
I know. Thank you, J Hook. Appreciate the guilt trip. Yeah, so Tony was I kind of made Tony more in charge this week than usual. I had
That's the beauty of having a partner, right? Is like, when me and Shelly in the tag team league, when I went on vacation, I was like, hey, Shelly, this is your ship. And so, I mean, that's just sometimes what you have to do, right? Is
we
rely on your partner.
We still had so I set a list before I left, and then we had a 45-minute conversation on the phone while I was at a bar talking about it. So I think we got, we did pretty much what we need to do. But I'm obsessive about this stuff. So like when I'm not like doing all of the research that I normally do, it feels, I don't like the feeling of it, but when one of your best friends is getting married, you gotta do it.
You didn't try to warn him and say, run away?
No, because this is the one girl that I could possibly see like ending up with him because he he's a challenge.
Good for him. Love is great. I don't know if my wife is watching or not. Here's another
Danielle,
one.
This is Justin saying this. I love you, Danielle. Just so you know.
I'm blinking a bunch, right? Oh no.
SOS.
Yeah, exactly. Another one that's close to your heart. Aaron Savali returning on Tuesday. Yeah. How confident are you that he's going to kind of be used properly, like be able to go deep enough for wins? And that he'll be as good as he was prior to the injury?
I actually feel pretty good about this one. I think he's been out a while, and I think now that the Indians have, like you're saying before, some teams either have a playoff spot wrapped up, so they don't have any need to rush guys back, and then other teams like the Indians have nothing to play for; they're not going to make the playoffs, so they have no reason to rush anyone back. So I don't think they're rushing him back. They gave him like 3 starts, and he looked really good, honestly. So, he's not, he's usable. Like, he's a guy who's better than what you're going to pick up on the waiver wire in 15 teamers by a good amount, I think. So especially good for like whip. He should have a decent K rate. And you just want to avoid bad matchups. But I if you had him this week, I would have started him for that 2 starts. I think he's going to go. I think they're going to let him go decently deep.
They let him go 5 in his last rehab start in Double-A. So I mean, there's no reason, like you said, like they wouldn't push a guy who is risky right here, considering they don't have any shot at the playoffs. Yeah. So yeah, I think you can ride Savali. I think he'll be an interesting guy next year, because there were a lot of big Savali fans coming into the season. Yeah. He looked good in stretches, but this injury kind of derailed the season. So I don't think he's going to be extremely expensive. And I think he'll be another guy we can kind of go back to the well on as a guy who is not, I don't want to call him a sleeper because I think everybody will be on him a little bit, but I don't think he'll be overpriced either.
Yeah, and I think he'll be kind of that workhorse that we were expecting him to be this year. Like the Indians like to push their starters. I think he's going to have a lot of games that he goes deep into, and he's going to give you probably, 180 plus innings next year.
Yeah, and if he can get another 25 to 30 innings this year, that'll put him at around 125 for the season, which means you can reasonably expect a good jump up to like 160, 170 next season.
Yeah, and like I said, the Indians are more aggressive with that than other teams. So I think 175, 180 is well within reach.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Savali is going to be a target for me next season.
I think so too.
Tony Gonsolin is going to be returning this week. The real question on this one is, do we care?
Well, for me and Tony, we do. We picked him up, I think, in both the main and the tag, or one of them, and I have him in the super. I don't know. 2 of my 3 big NFBC teams have him. I'll be honest with you. My expectations aren't super high in terms of I don't know that he's going to be right, and I definitely don't think he's going to be going deep into games, especially because I think he only had 1 rehab start, I think, and it was like 2 1/3 innings or something like that. And you know, I can't see him going beyond 4 innings this first game back. But
I think you'll be lucky if you get 4 innings.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I agree. I just don't. I think that's the max. I think he's probably going to go somewhere between 2 and 4. I'm hoping in a week he'll be able to go, 5 innings. I don't think he'll ever really be going 6 or 7. But when you pitch for the Dodgers, you've got a good shot at wins. So I mean, if he can go those 5 innings, then and if he's right, and I don't know if he's right or not, so we'll have to see because we really don't have much of a barometer on that. He's been out for a long time, and they only gave him 1 rehab start, so we'll see. Is all I can really say.
I think I would be much more interested in him rest of the way if he had an opener. If David Price is starting and Gonsolin is following, I'd be much more interested because then you have a real chance at wins.
And they could do that. We don't know what their plan is with him. They haven't really told us much yet.
Absolutely. So I mean, I think this is a situation you kind of keep monitoring and kind of see later in the week when he does make his return. Is he the starter or is he the follower? Because a follower situation would be much more sexy in terms of getting win potential. Because I have a feeling you're not going to see him go 5 rest of the way. It's
possible. I had that thought, and it's just he was like 5th or 6th down our claims list, and like it was we just couldn't bring ourselves to put some guys ahead of him. It's just like some of these other guys are super sketchy options. So we're like, hey, Gonsolin, there is that ceiling. Maybe 2 weeks from now that he can go 5 innings and get us some wins down the stretch, maybe. But like I said, expectations are not high.
Then the final news piece is Lucas Giolito and Lance Lynn are expected to return fairly soon. We don't have exact dates yet, but either end of this week or beginning of next week. So, I mean, obviously you've hopefully held on to them. You're going to start them kind of as they come back. We expect them to be guys that I think the White Sox will just let pitch. But in terms of as we transition into strategy talk for September, how do you kind of deal with these kind of issues when a guy hits the IL this late in the season? Because you don't want to make the mistake of instantly dropping a difference maker, but you also don't want to be the guy who's held on to Clayton Kershaw or Jack Flaherty for weeks and had to, really stretch your bench kind of thin. So talk a little bit about your process as we now transition into the strategy section.
Yeah, so we kind of touched on this a little earlier, but for me, a lot of it depends on the severity of the injury. You know, like we were saying, if it's in September and it's a pitcher with an arm injury or a shoulder injury, you know, forearm, something like that, I'm moving on. You know, if it's something that's just like precautionary and it's like a, you know, groin strain or something that they could potentially return within 10 days from, and or, you know, just something that is not an actual, like they're claiming with Giolito that it was purely precautionary and, you know, he's fine. Like he could have kept pitching if they needed him to. So in those cases, I'm going to take them at their word, especially if it's a guy who's like a stud like that. I mean, Giolito hasn't really been a stud this year, but he's been, you know, obviously much better than an average pitcher too. So that's kind of how I'm approaching it in general. Like it's on a case by case basis. You just don't want to be sacrificing any of your bench slots for a guy if you don't want to be taking zeros. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you're going to be starting, you know, Kyle Freeland in Colorado or something like that. Like you'd rather move on too early from a guy if you can still have a good replacement for him in this current week. You know, it's kind of a case by case thing. You know, you just have to make that decision based on your team composition and roster.
Yeah, I think that it's always kind of a balancing act for me, especially. Like I'm much more conservative traditionally. I'm trying to be more aggressive in the players I drop and willing to move on from. But it's a really, like, for instance, I've been one of those guys that have not dropped Kershaw. Like I've got Kershaw still on both of my main event teams, just because I couldn't rationalize doing it for what was on the waiver wire, right. And that's meant I have to like really keep myself very thin on that bench, and I think that's a mistake. I think that was kind of a poor decision on my. At this point, Kershaw hopefully back next week. I got to just ride it out, right? But I should have 2 or 3 weeks ago dropped Kershaw.
Yeah, I would say probably. I'm on the more aggressive side, and I think most high stakes players are. Like we're kind of experienced in knowing that a lot of times when guys are out for a long period of time, like even when they come back, you're not getting Kershaw. You know, you're getting like a watered down version of Kershaw, and like even their first start back, you're probably not going to want to start them and everything. Like if they've been out for, you know, over a month, and I know, you know, Phil Dussault, who's probably the best fantasy baseball player in the world right now, he moves on super quickly. Like if someone gets hurt and he thinks that they're going to be out for an extended period of time, he just moves on. So take that for what it's worth. So
and that is worth its weight in gold because Phil is insane. Yeah. I was just talking with, I think it was Frank Stamfel last night. I did a couple guest spots at the pods. And I don't know if I said this on air or off air, but I'll say it on air now for the world to see. I am not afraid of anyone. Absolutely not afraid of anyone. I don't care how good you are, what your record is and stuff. Right, but like, I'm not going to change my league based on who is in it. I'm going to do that from now on with Phil. I don't want to play against Phil anymore. Like, there's no reason to put yourself... Like, he's got 3 main event teams. They're all in the top 25 in the overall.
He's got like 30 teams overall, and they're all cashing. So
it's insane how good he is at this.
And, you know, here's the thing. And believe me, I'm agreeing with you. Phil's the best player in the world right now. I will say that I do think he's going to be able to sustain the success for a while, but we have seen people have dominant seasons and then, you know, not necessarily be able to translate to the next season. I don't think that's going to be the case with Phil personally. And, you know, he's been a guy who I've gotten to know over the last couple of years. Like, he's a good friend. I never wanted to be in a league with him because I knew he was good, but also because we talk a lot. And so I don't like to be in leagues with my friends and with people who know what I'm going to do and who we discuss, like, because then we can't talk about fab. We can't talk about what are we bidding on guys because then we're competing against each other, you know. And when you're playing for thousands of dollars, you know, it's not a $25 league or something, like, where who cares? But you know, so you have to really kind of limit who you want to be in a league with. But yeah, I don't want to be in any leagues with him. But having said that, I never back down from anyone either. And if he's in my league, it is what it is. I'm still going to pick myself to win because you shouldn't be playing at my level, at our level, in high stakes, unless you think you're going to, like, you need to think that you're the shark, that you're going to win. And, you know, it's always possible to make those adjustments going into the next year. I know I've grown a lot in this last year with player evaluation. And, Phil is all player evaluation. I was like mostly strategy with some player evaluation. So now that my player evaluation skills are catching up, I'm hoping I can keep up with them next year. We'll see, but it's a challenge, and that's what makes this so fun. You want to beat the best, right? You want to prove that you can beat them. At the same time, though, you don't want to go poor trying to do this. So, you don't want to put all your eggs in the baskets of all of Phil's leagues. So.
Yeah, the entire season I've been looking up at him at the top of our league and just been like, this is insane. I think the other guy who's in second in that main event league that I'm in has fallen out of the top 10 of the overall. But at one point, I had like 2 guys in one of my leagues who were in the top 10 in the main event overall, and it was just like fighting for third. But that's okay. I'll still fight.
I have one of them in my league right now, Mark Cerebro, who's also one of the best players in the world.
Mark's great as well.
He's awesome. And I want to say too, I'm super happy for Phil, because Phil is like one of the nicest, most humble guys. Always willing. I mean, he's not willing to share everything, obviously, but he will talk with you a lot about his process and what he does. Not like necessarily all the little specifics and everything, obviously, but he's very open about things and easy to talk to, and just overall great guy. And, if it couldn't be me or my crew winning it, then I'm happy for Phil to do it.
Absolutely. Really good guy.
I hope he wins the main event, because, I don't have a shot at it anyway. So,
yeah, me neither. So I'm definitely rooting for him.
Yep.
Let's, you've kind of already mentioned this, but like talk about like do you even hold on to IL guys at all at the end? I mean, I know you're the anti-injury guy coming into the season,
right?
But like, or are you going with that Phil kind of strategy of a guy's hurt right now, I've got 3 weeks left, I just need to jettison to make sure I've got enough guys so I don't take any zeros?
Yeah, that's the thing. You have to first and foremost make sure that you have, replacements. So like if because midweek someone else could get hurt, right? Like there's no limit on things happening to you before the next fab period. So I always want to make sure I have a couple guys, or at least one at any position that I can put in. So if someone goes down midweek, I can put them in for the second half of the week. I don't want to be in a position where I have to take zeros, and I also don't want to be in a position where I have to put a shitty starter in for a bad week. Like I was saying, Kyle Freeland had a 2-start week, but one of them is in Coors. I wanted no part of that. Like, I did not want to be in a position where I would have to make that start. So I'm willing to hold like maybe 1 or possibly 2 if they're both like studs who I think are going to be back after a minimum stay. But other than that, yeah, I'm jettisoning and moving on.
Well, on that kind of same idea, like this is interesting thing, because what we did tonight was I let you kind of develop what we were going to talk about in this section. And the thing you said is your roster should look more like the post-draft waiver wire in April than what you drafted. Talk about that, because I think that's a really interesting concept that maybe people don't really buy into enough.
Okay, so yeah, I made this comment last year on our pod, and I've kind of said it a few times since then. And I said that your roster should look more like the post-draft waiver wire in April than what you drafted, because right now you need production. Like I'm, like take my Yahoo leagues for example. I've been able to maintain a good lead in both of my high stakes leagues in there, because it's daily changes. And when a guy's cold, and I don't know if they're going to get, catch on fire again or something, and they're not like one of those 5 category studs or whatever, like Trey Mancini, probably a guy you wouldn't consider dropping normally. I dropped him a couple weeks ago because other guys were producing right now, and I saw good matchups to take advantage of, and so I did it. So even if Trey Mancini ends up hitting, I'm still not losing anything, because the guys that I replaced him with are doing well. So you always got to kind of think about, okay, maybe this guy comes back later and produces, but there's a decent chance that he doesn't. And if the guy that I can get is like someone I believe can legitimately produce for, a couple weeks, then it's worth doing. Even if later down the line Mancini starts hitting, it's more important to get that production right now, because you don't want to be holding on to guys because they have name value. You don't want to hold on to a guy just because you drafted him in the 3rd or 4th round or whatever. Like, that doesn't mean shit at this point in the year. All that matters is production. So you need to do whatever you need to do to keep productive players in your lineup at all costs. That's how you're going to win leagues.
And I think this is an amazing point, and it's something I struggle with too. You know, very similar to what we said, what I was talking about before. Is I tend to be a little bit more conservative with my drops. I need to be better about stripping the name off and
Exactly.
really just
Yeah.
looking at the numbers and who's producing right now and where I think the production can go rest of season. Because you know, there's no reason to hold on to a guy who, you know, like I said, drafted in third, fourth, fifth round if Frank Schwindel is out on the waiver wire, right?
Exactly.
That's a huge difference, you know. For in my TGFBI league, for instance, I had Schwindel on my bench this week. That crushes me.
Yeah.
Like, you know, when I should have had him starting. Like, I mean, there's no reason. The way he's been hitting should have been my lineup. I need to personally be better about taking the name out of it, forgetting the name value, because all the name value ends up being is bias.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's you just and this is part of what makes Phil so good is he, you know, doesn't look at names, he just looks at production. You do have to be careful though, because there are guys who just have like a hot streak. Like you remember a couple weeks ago when Brinson was on a heater or whatever, and everyone was picking him up. You want to make sure you're not just picking up guys who have like off the charts BABIP. Like I think his BABIP was like 480 or no, I think maybe over 500. Like,
and if you had looked at the underlying stats on Brinson, you could see like he was swinging outside the zone like 47% of the time. He was in zone contact was like under 70%. Like it was the same old. I think his swing strike rate was like 17%. Those are just approximate numbers. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I remember having this discussion with someone on a podcast and being like, no, Lewis Brinson is still Lewis Brinson. This is just an extended hot streak.
Yeah, and I actually had this conversation with Peter Pratt, like, I don't know, a month and a half ago, our UK buddy, who's a huge Marlins fan. And, you know, I told him, I'm like, I don't think this is sustainable, man. I think he's going to go back to sucking pretty shortly here. And then, like, a couple days later, he went, like, on a 1-for-40 streak or whatever, you know. So you just got to make sure that whoever you're picking up is doing something sustainably good for a short period of time. Because this fantasy baseball and baseball itself is a game of streaks, you know, like, guys end up here, but that's after a hot streak and a cold streak, and so you want to catch them as they're warming up and getting on that hot streak and just riding it out for as long as possible, especially while they're facing, you know, I'm always making sure I'm picking up guys who are facing bad pitchers. You know, I'm looking at who's facing Baltimore this week or who's in Coors and stuff like that, especially in daily changes leagues. You know, you want to make sure you're targeting those guys, or who's facing Matt Manning or Zach Davies. You know, these are what give you that edge, is just making the little adjustments to your team that other people don't do because it's a lot of work and they don't want to go through the effort. They're like, oh, well, this guy is not as good as this guy. It doesn't matter. Like it's all about production now.
Well, and let's talk about that, because there are a lot of people who aren't willing to do the work, right? They're not going to dig into the standings. So are you digging like deep into the standings right now and figuring out exactly what categories and points you can make up room in?
Yes, I do a ton of work on this. So I look at every single league that I'm in, and I look at not just how much I can move up in an individual category in that league, but also how much I can move down. So like if I decide to punt something, how much could I potentially lose there? Because if like I can't move up in steals, but I've got like 3 guys on my ass, and including one of the guys, and I always double count the guys who are ahead of me. If there's anybody ahead of me, those are in particular what I want to target. So if the guy is like 3 steals behind me who's ahead of me overall, I need to make sure I stay ahead of him in steals. So I'm going to keep guys on enough to maintain that lead without, you know, trying to overload my roster with a bunch of steals guys. And if you find yourself, say, up like 20 steals, you're in first place, you know, don't start guys like Miles Straw or Leody Taveras, because what are they providing you? You know, like, always be questioning, why are you making every play that you're making? You know, where can I move up the most? If recently in the tag team league that you are in with your tag partner, Shelly Verstrate, and Tony and I are in, we recently we punted saves. We dropped Ian Kennedy. He was our only closer. You know, we kept trying to find that second, third closer, just never came to fruition. There's a ton of competition because we're all bunched up in saves, you know, and we ended up on the bottom. We were in last place, and last week we took a look and we said, you know, we can move up a lot in Ks and wins if we just punt saves and stop trying to roll 2 closers here and just throw in another couple starters. So that's what we decided to do. So right now, what you need to do is be realistic. Look at the standings. And what I do for each category is I put like +3, -2, which means I can go up 3 and I can go down 2 feasibly. Because you can make up a good amount in some things, but if you're 50 homers behind someone at this point, you're probably not going to make that up in 4 weeks. So be looking to see where can I feasibly move up the most and down the least to figure out where I should be putting my emphasis. Should I be putting more power hitters in the lineup, more steals guys, whatever you need to do, whatever adjustments you need to make. And then on the other side of that coin with pitching categories, I try to avoid anything that's going to tank your ratios because you do not have the time to recover those ratios. Because if you have a couple bad starts, 4 weeks is not enough time for you to recover. You need to have a bunch of good starts after that. So I'm particularly looking to protect my ERA, my WHIP this time of year, because if you have those bad, if you throw out a guy who you're like, well, I just want to, it's a 2 start, and even though they face Toronto and they're in Coors, I'm just going to do it anyways because I need wins and Ks. But then you end up really torching your ratios so badly that you can't recover. You want to avoid doing that.
I think that's a really, really good point. And often people think that, hey, I've racked up 950, 1,000, 1,100 innings so far this season. Like my ratios aren't going to move very much. That is wrong. There's
Correct.
been some really smart people in this industry. Todd Zola is one I reference all the time, who've done work on how much ratios move in the last month of the season.
Yep.
The reason I am more aggressive with streaming early on in the season is so I don't want to do it now.
Right.
And that is like part of my strategy is to be more aggressive early on in the season because I can bail myself out a little bit better if I put myself in a hole, but I can't like do anything if I don't want to shoot the moon right now. Like I don't want to be going with guys who, this guy could get me, 12 strikeouts, but he might give me a 7 ERA today.
Exactly. And this is September, so this is call-up season.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a lot of rookies, and another thing that Phil and I both do is we try to avoid using rookie pitchers because even the good ones are so inconsistent. You look at Tyler McGill and Luis Patino and some of those other guys. Like they just had a couple of blow-ups recently, and like they were pitching. They've had some good spots where they pitched really well, but even against bad teams now, they're kind of blowing up, and that happens. Like rookie pitchers are inconsistent. So and that's pretty much who you're picking up this time of the year. Like all of the good veterans are all owned. You're not going to find an Adam Wainwright on your waiver wire. I wouldn't think. So like where are you gonna get someone that you can depend on to not trash your ratios? So like you said, this is not the time of the year that you want to be taking any chances with your ratios.
And going back to something you just kind of were talking about in terms of like having a plan, like when you're having this plan, like make sure like you are not necessarily, and you put this in the sheet, so I'm totally ripping you off right here.
Yeah,
but like one of the things I tell people in trade leagues is it's more important to win your league than it is to win the trade. So sometimes you trade away the better player, but it helps your team win the league. And I love that you put in this rundown that we're working off of, like sometimes playing a worse player is more important, so that way you can win that category or move up in that category.
Yeah, exactly. And this was the frustration for me this year in my Yahoo leagues, even though I'm now in first. At the trade deadline, I think I was barely in first in one and in second in the other one. And I was trying to make trades. I was offering way more than I should have to try to improve my team because I'm like, okay, I don't need this, but I need this. So I'm willing to offer more. And these people weren't accepting because people get so attached to their players. They cannot see the forest through the trees. It's like they don't understand. It's not about winning the freaking trade. Like, and they were winning it anyways. They still didn't want to do the trade, but fine, whatever. But like, you need to make these trades to make your teams better. Now in NFBC, we can't make trades, obviously, but it's not about, you need to put your ego aside. It's not about that. Like, you just need to make your team better. It's just about, it's as simple as that. So yeah, and it's the same thing with setting your lineup. If a guy isn't helping us, like Ian Kennedy, he's a good player, he's a closer, but if we're punting saves, what do we need Ian Kennedy for? You know, we're gonna throw him out there and let you guys fight over him. So that's what we're gonna do.
One of the best things that ever happened in the fantasy industry, and one of the worst things that ever happened in the fantasy industry all at the same time, was a show called The League, and I'm sure you've seen it, because the league, like a huge part of the league, was them trying to take advantage of each other and just win every trade. But you don't win fantasy leagues that way, right? No. You win fantasy leagues by putting together the best overall team, especially when we're talking about Roto. But this works in head-to-head points, head-to-head categories as well. It's the team who is the best constructed overall that wins. It's not about having necessarily the best individual player. And we see this a lot with trades. And it's one of the reasons why I love NFBC more than I did initially. Because initially I was like, I hate that there's no trades. I love trading. But now that I've been doing it for a few years, I'm like, God, like I hate having to go through trade negotiations with certain people, because I'm just banging my head up against the wall because I'm trying to explain. This happened in the Barf League. Like I was stacked in pitching.
I was going to ask you, because so for those of you who don't know, Justin's in Barf and I'm in Glarf, and we're both a part of this overall, what we call Earth, which is comprised of Glarf, Barf.
Are you still leading the overall?
I am still leading the overall by a good amount, yes.
Okay.
There's also Nerf, Turf, and Werf. Yeah. So in this league, when we joined up, we decided to take on Barf's rules, which because Barf was the original league to start this. And your rules are OBP instead of average, and
quality starts instead of wins.
Correct. Yeah. But the other thing was that there was also trades allowed. So it's been a very interesting year for some of us, because some people are very, very stubborn when it comes to making trades, and I imagine you've run into that a bit as well.
Oh, it was. I mean, I had the most stacked pitching staff, and like I could not get anybody to trade me hitting. It was so frustrating. Finally got 2 deals done, but it took me weeks and weeks, to the point where it just wasn't enough to really push me into like contention. Right. At this point, I'm just fighting to beat Matt Davis, because him and I have had a bet that goes back all the way to the beginning of last season, that if I beat him, he has to get a tattoo of the Mason face on his ass.
Oh, wow. Oh, that is, wow, that's big. Okay, now, is this beat him in the Barf League?
In the league, yes.
Okay.
In the league, because this was before there was an overall. This is because originally it was supposed to happen last season, but when COVID shut everything down, he went, "Hey, can we just push it to next year?" I was like, "I don't care. For a shot, fine. That works." And then he went on to win that league, and then but now he's like, I think we're neck and neck. I'm ahead of him in the standings right now.
I'm looking right now, and it's showing you in 7th and him in 8th, but this is as of Sunday night, I think. But you're considerably ahead of him in the overall. He's 41st and you're 25th.
I mean, if I could have just gotten a couple more offensive players, I would have competed for the overall. Unfortunately, my offense just let me down. Like at one point, when Kyle Gibson was still pitching well, he was the worst pitcher in my rotation. Like I had like Pablo Lopez, Giolito, Lance Lynn. I ended up trading Giolito and Lance Lynn for Castellanos, and I can't remember who the other hitter was. Oh, Chris Bryant. In 2 separate deals, but just not enough to push me up, unfortunately.
My rotation.
All right,
I've got Robbie Ray and Zach Wheeler and Dylan Cease and Herman Marquez, but maybe not as good as yours, but it's been good enough.
Yeah. Let's talk about hitters. Like, what do you do in terms of approaching, like, how you evaluate your hitters moving forward in September?
So I'm looking for guys who either play every day or have a good schedule for their roles. So, like, if they're a strong side platoon hitter, I'm looking for, times where they're facing 5+ righties in a week in weekly changes leagues. In NFBC, what I really try to do, even before September, but especially in September, I start looking at half-week plays instead of full-week plays. So you might have a guy like Darren Ruff, who's probably available out there because he doesn't start versus righties. But if the Giants ever face 3 lefties, even 2 sometimes, I'll look at if other guys I have like 3 games and Darren Ruff has 2 versus a lefty, I will play him because you can pick him up for $1 and you can play him for that half week, and he's elite production versus lefties. Like, this guy is a stud, but he just doesn't play that often, unfortunately. So you want to be looking for every little advantage like that. I'm looking for who's facing the worst dregs of the pitchers. You know, like if I'm who's facing Zach Davies or Matt Manning. You know, every week someone is. So even if the hitter isn't that special, if they have a role and I can play them, 3-4 games a week, and that includes facing really bad pitching, that's how I can help get a leg up there. I can throw those guys in there. Now, if you're playing in like a daily transaction league like Yahoo, you can do the same thing, but with a much higher level of player. Like, I just picked up Austin Hayes in a bunch of leagues because he has like 6 out of his next 9 games against lefties. So I can use him for those 9 games, and then after that, I can jettison him back to the waivers when they go back to facing a bunch of righties and pick up someone else who's got a good upcoming schedule. So you just have to continuously be willing to do that work that other people aren't willing to, or who are too short-sighted to do.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And again, this goes back to some people aren't going to do the footwork, right? They're not gonna. They don't have the time. They don't care. Whatever the reason is, or they just don't know that, hey, I can get a competitive advantage by sitting down and doing this out. Do you have like a spreadsheet for all this stuff like that you're keeping track of?
Yeah, so I use a spreadsheet where I have all the categories and every team, how much I can lose and gain in each category, so I know what I'm targeting and what I need to keep an eye on. And then I'm also looking at all the hitter schedules upcoming, and especially the pitcher schedules. And what I'm doing with starters is, at this point in the season, I'm looking at every single start that they have left. So, if they have, 5 starts left maybe, and like 4 of them are against really good teams, like Antonio Senzatela was a guy I was considering picking up. I know he's not like particularly good, but he has been playing well lately. But then like you look at his schedule and it's like, Dodgers and Coors and like San Francisco Giants. It's like
Coors,
I'm like, I want no part of this schedule. So, you need to look at all of your pitchers, see who they're facing from here on in, and the guys who aren't those every week plays, ask yourself, are you going to be starting them those weeks? And especially if it's like way down the line, like the last week or two, I'm not as concerned about that because there's so much can change between now and then. They could even get shut down. Like a lot of these teams, a lot of these kind of mediocre pitchers on these teams could get shut down early, especially coming out off of the short season, because we're seeing guys who are already like 100 innings past where they were last year. How much more are they going to be played? And if the teams are out of it, or if they need to save them for the playoffs, they're not going to be pushing them down the stretch. So you really just need to be smart about what pitchers am I going to be able to use. And I have a spreadsheet that shows, okay, week 1, week 2, week 3, do I have my 9 pitchers? If I don't, I need to look ahead and say, okay, 2 weeks from now, I'm going to need a starter to stream. Who has a good matchup that week? Because if I'm looking ahead 2 weeks, nobody might not be picking them up because maybe they're in Coors this week, so everyone's off of them. But you want to be ahead of the curve instead of behind it. So I try to look ahead as much as possible. And, a lot of this stuff can change. Obviously, schedules can change all the time. But, it's all you can do, really, is just try to plan out so that you always are giving yourself the best options you can give yourself.
Do you think that 2-start pitchers are more valuable kind of rest of the way just because there's so few starts left?
It depends. It depends on whether you're trying to protect your ratios or if you need those strikeouts and wins. So, if they're good enough where you're not concerned about them blowing up your ratios, then it's very important. So, you should definitely be looking to see who's got those 2 starts coming up. And some teams are still using a 6-man rotation too, so you got to be wary of that. And make sure you're counting 6 down the line, not 5 every 5th start, every 6th start instead of every 5th start.
How important is like a site like Roster Resource for you right now? Because not only you having to like manage like what starters are going to be in 6-man rotations or who they're going up against, where they're pitching, like lineups are important right now too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think Vlad put out a tweet a while ago, and I've put out tweets about the lineup tracker, Roster Resource lineup tracker on Fangraphs. it is, if you give me, like you say, you can only use one tool for the whole season, that's my tool that I'm going to use. Because with that, I'm able to see several things: how often players play, who they play against, what team tendencies are. Like the Rays, for example. You got a guy like Manuel Margot. He sometimes plays 4 out of 4 games. Sometimes he plays 2 out of 5 games, and that's super frustrating. It's never like, it's not like just that he plays versus all lefties or all righties. It's like a mixture of both. And it allows you to figure out, okay, what can I depend on, and then what do I need? And I mean, I never close the lineup tracker. I just have it open at all times, and I try to look at it every day to see if there's anything coming up, and then I'll make a note of something like, okay, this guy's playing more now and stuff like that. And make sure that you're looking at what handed pitcher they're playing, because I saw someone pick up like Eugenio Suarez recently, because he had started like 6 out of 7 because they faced like 6 out of 7 lefties. I don't think I think they thought, oh, he's starting from here on out. No, he was just facing a bunch of lefties. So now when they go back to facing righties, he's going to be sitting again. So you got to make sure you're looking like in depth at this stuff to make sure, okay, this guy starts versus lefties, this guy starts versus righties, this guy like Margot is very sporadic. So you just have to know what you have, and then you can kind of figure out, okay, where do I need to make changes now?
Yeah, I think it's really important not to just look at the lineups, but also what the future is, and kind of meld those two together. I think it's super, super important. And so that's why spreadsheeting stuff out, I think, is a great idea. And it's something that I've tried to really do this season in much more detail than I have in the past. It's been very effective for me.
Yep. I know your wife loves spreadsheets too. So,
she's like the spreadsheet queen, dude. Like,
well, I remember when we were doing the beating him at his own game pod in the off season, and you had me on for an episode, and I started talking about spreadsheets. She started to get visibly excited. So
yeah,
if you're ever looking for a little extra, juice there in the bedroom, spreadsheets might be the way to get her there.
Yeah, no, you know what? Every once in a while, when I'm feeling like I need to kind of change things up, I pull out the projector, put a little spreadsheet on there, put it up on the wall, light some candles, and just lay back and be like, "Hey, baby, where's your VLOOKUP?"
Oh God.
Oh,
man. I mean, this is something that I need to get better at, though, because this is a big reason why Phil is as successful as he is a master at this, and he knows how to scrape data from sites, and that's what I need to do, because I know what I want. I just have no idea how to make it happen.
Yeah,
like
I'm the same way. Yeah.
I need someone who's not technologically challenged like myself to be like, okay, Dave, tell me what information you need, and I will give you a spreadsheet that pulls it all up. Because then all Phil does is update the spreadsheet, and it gives him all the information he needs, and then he has a formula that spits out a number, and that number represents, like, this guy is a 67 for this week, whereas this guy is a 37, stuff like that. And that's one way to do it. I don't think you necessarily need to do it that way with the points. It just makes it easier for him because he doesn't spend as much time on this, which is really sad when you think about it. But I just need to be able to do that where I can scrape information and then have it give me what I'm looking for. Like their blast rate or whatever, their WOBA versus righties and all that at home and all that. It would be really useful. I just don't know how to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I've been trying to actually like kind of drop hints with my boss to see if she'll let me take an Excel class on the company's dime for my actual job, but also like selfishly so I can learn a little bit more about this stuff. So let's talk about motivation, because this is one I think we might have a little bit of disagreement on. You say one other factor you look at is motivation. Why?
Yeah.
And what does that mean?
Well, I'm sorry. What was the last word you said? But
I said one of the factors you look at is motivation. I want to say, what does that mean and why?
Okay. So, this is, and you might have some pushback here, as you said, and that's fine, because this isn't something that I don't have any, I'm not the guy who does, proves data and stuff like that. Like, I just have experience to go off of, 25 years of playing fantasy baseball. What I've noticed is that teams that are still playing for something, kind of seem to perform better. Now, granted, from a pitching aspect, it's pretty simple, right? Like, these pitchers are very motivated to win and everything. Like if you're facing a team that's out of contention, maybe sometimes you might come across a team that's like, hey, we're still throwing down, we're still ready to play. But you see these teams who are still competing, and they have really good lineups. You see the same guys in the lineup every day. And we'll go over a list of those teams shortly here too. But you don't want your pitchers to be facing a lot of these offenses, because Boston and New York and Toronto and Houston, they're not sitting their studs. They're playing them every day pretty much. So I want to avoid facing them with my pitchers. And if I can get a piece of those offenses, I feel in having done this for so long that usually those players perform better. I'm not saying all the time, obviously. Like there's still going to be guys on the Marlins who have good weeks and everything. And if you're facing bad pitching, then it's fine. Throw in some Marlins hitters. But all things being equal, I prefer my pitchers and hitters to be on those teams that are still playing for something.
I mean, I guess I agree for a different reason. I think I like having players on teams that are doing well, because they're more likely to get, added stats from that, right? A team that is better, a team on the Yankees or a player on the Yankees is probably going to get more runs and RBIs than a player on the Marlins, for instance, because the team around him is better in general. I to be honest, and you're gonna get the brunt of something that that isn't just from you, but like this is my least favorite trope in all of like sports fandom, is like the players have like this added motivation on better teams, or when they're going for a playoff spot, that like these are professional athletes. Like they get up to compete every day. Now there are obviously cases in which there are some people who just dog it, right?
Yeah. How about since Trevor Story wasn't traded, how's he been doing?
But that's one example. Cedric Mullins is doing just fine.
Did he ask to be traded?
No, but I mean, he's on a shitty ass team. They're not competing for anything. Right. Like for every example of someone you're going to give me of someone,
those are not equal though, because
this is all anecdotal.
But Trevor Story has made his name, has made his money to a certain degree. Like Mullins is just starting to break out now. Like
no, Trevor Story is playing for a contract.
But he's established. People know what Trevor Story is. Mullins is different. He's a guy who is in the middle of his breakout year. So I don't expect him to be unmotivated. I mean, he was the first guy to reach the 25-25 plateau this year.
Yeah, he was. I just wanted to mention that.
And maybe, I haven't really looked at this, but I don't know if anybody will. But there's only, a month left. I can't imagine too many more guys are going to reach that plateau, if any. So I just feel like that's not, again, this is anecdotal, but I don't feel like that's a fair comparison from Story to Mullins.
Okay. I mean, like, for instance, Whit Merrifield is doing just fine.
Okay.
Like,
but he's going to be traded. Like, Story is clearly unhappy.
Good, but I mean, like, how are we supposed to know who's unhappy and who's not? Like, that's just a individual example. Like, generally speaking, players are motivated to play, or they're not. Like, it has little to do with like, ooh, my team's competitive this year or not.
This is just something I try to do. It's not. Again, I'm not like.
I can understand it being like a tiebreaker and stuff, but like, I just think it's. I think that's one that I just don't buy into.
It's a tiebreaker when it comes to hitters. When it comes to pitchers, I definitely want to avoid facing those teams that are in playoff contention. I think that they're more likely to put out a competitive lineup. How about that? At the very least, you can say that. I think that they're going to put out the lineup to win every game. They're not just, you look at Atlanta's lineup when guys are healthy, it's like the same damn lineup every single freaking day. So, because they're competing, they're trying to make the playoffs still. They're not satisfied yet. So, I want to avoid facing teams that are consistently putting out good lineups. And I think
that's fair. Yeah. That's absolutely fair. I mean, right now you want to try to get those little advantages. And yeah, I mean, if you're going up against a good team, that's a mark in the bad direction.
Right. Now, when we get down to and we'll cover this more later down the line, but in the final week, a lot of those teams that have those playoff spots sewn up and who have nothing to play for in the other direction where they're already clinched and everything, you actually don't mind facing those because a lot of times you're going to see some real sloppy lineups at the end of the year. Like you're going to see a lot of those guys that have been playing every day sitting now and all that stuff because they're just going to rest them up for the playoffs. So it kind of takes a turn at the end of the season then the other direction.
Absolutely, that's definitely something I like to pay attention to. And what as we start to see teams like the Brewers are going to wrap things up here, the White Sox are going to wrap things up here. The Giants and Dodgers, they're not. I mean, these teams are going to go back and forth.
Yeah, they're fighting for first place. Like they're both going to make the playoffs, but winning the West matters. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's huge to win the West because you do not want to have to go face the Reds or the Padres in that wild card game.
Absolutely, and you want home field advantage.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I'm going to be so pissed if the Dodgers
the
end up
Giants
sneaking
would
past
held on to it so long, and it would be so. Oh. I mean, it would just crush you to all of a sudden have the Dodgers take the lead on in the last week.
Though I will say, if I'm remembering correctly, and I think I am, all three of the Giants World Series seasons, they were the wild card team.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure all three. I know at least two. But, it obviously doesn't eliminate you but you want to play at home, right?
Yeah,
you don't want to have to play that one game playoff.
I mean, that's a cool stat, but that means jack shit. So
that means absolutely nothing.
So you'll still take home field advantage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just don't want the Dodgers to win.
Exactly.
That's the most. As much as I want to see the Giants win another World Series, and I really do. I much more prefer if just the Dodgers don't win another World Series.
I don't like the Dodgers. I mean, I don't really dislike any teams in the NL the way I do in the AL, like I do the Yankees and the Red Sox. But the Dodgers would be the team that I would root against if there's a team I'm against in the NL. So I'm all for the Giants winning it. That'd be good by me.
All right. So what teams are you targeting to get players from, or to use players more, and which ones are you trying to avoid?
So those are kind of like both sides of the same coin. Like these are the teams that you want to target for your own team and you want to avoid facing. And in the AL, that would be the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Blue Jays, the Astros, the Mariners, the A's. And then for right now, I put the Rays and the White Sox because they're not going to stop. It's too early for them to push the brakes, but a couple weeks down the line, they've got Tampa and the White Sox have, they've got it sewn up. They're not losing their hold on the division. So they're gonna probably start sitting guys. Well, I don't know how you tell the difference on the Rays because
the Rays might as well just be they don't have anybody who plays every day anyways, pretty much.
Exactly. I think Brandon Lau is the guy who plays closest to every day, but they sit guys randomly everywhere.
It'll be important though for if you're using starters on the Rays, because I do think you could see them even push the brakes a little bit more on their starters, even more than they already do, which will make guys like, if you've been streaming Michael Walker or Luis Patino or McClanahan, like these are guys who may not go 5 in their starts, pretty soon here.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're going to see that again. We don't know what innings limits teams are going to have for their guys, but I do think that we're going to start seeing some guys get skipped for starts and shut down early and everything, depending on what the team needs. If they need them for the playoffs or if they are already out of contention, so they're just going to shut them down early because they've got nothing to play for. I think we're going to see a lot of that. And then on the NL side, I think the Giants, the Dodgers, the Padres, the Braves, the Phillies, the Mets, the Cardinals, and the Reds, and then also for right now, the Brewers are all teams that are going to be with something to play for still. The Brewers, again, they have it sewn up. They're just they're not going to shut it down this early, so they're going to keep going. But we do know from what they've said in the offseason, and I don't know if they're going to stick to this, but that they weren't going to push anybody past 100 innings over what they went in 2020. So the Brewers are typically pretty conservative when it comes to their pitchers. They like to rest them. I think we're going to see guys like especially Freddie Peralta and guys like that get skipped occasionally and maybe have abbreviated outings.
Well, and I think that's like really important to kind of like you can even target middle relievers on a team like the Brewers, where you can be like, hey, maybe Woodruff isn't going to get pushed or Corbin Burns isn't going to get pushed in this. They're definitely not Freddie Peralta. He's definitely not going to get pushed.
Right.
So maybe like, guys like Brent Suter, like, Jake Cousins,
I picked up a couple
Aaron
of,
Ashby.
Yeah, I picked up a couple of Ashby shares. I'm hoping that they give him some starts down the stretch just to give their other guys a rest.
Well, even if they don't give them starts, like I'd much rather them start those guys for 2 or 3 innings and then bring in Ashby as kind of the follower, as a guy, guy who can pick up cheap wins down the stretch. So, like, if you're win hunting, those kind of guys down the stretch are going to be really interesting.
Yep.
What else, like, do you do in terms of end of season strategy? We talked about a lot of stuff, gone on for over an hour. So I think we've covered just about everything that was on your rundown. Anything else that you want to kind of bring up or remind people of to kind of do to give them an edge?
Well, so one thing that I do when I'm looking for offenses to target with my starting pitching is I look at 3 things. I look at so if it's a right-handed pitching, I'm looking at the team's WOBA versus righties. And then I'm also looking at if they're home or away, I'm looking at their WOBA home and away. And then I'm also looking at the last 14 days WOBA. That one I don't like, Texas right now has like a top 10 WOBA for the last 14 days. Am I worried about, facing Texas? No. I take it with a grain of salt. But sometimes you see a team that's like running really, really hot. And, like they've got like a 420 WOBA over the last 14 days. I generally try to avoid those if possible. So I'm really looking to think about in depth every single matchup. And that's kind of what I'm hoping people get from this is question everything. Don't just say, okay, this guy is this guy, so I'm just going to play him. Like, look at their matchups, look at how good the team is versus that, that guy in that situation and, home or away or whatever. Just be questioning, why am I playing this guy? If you're putting a guy in your lineup, don't just do it because you've been doing it. If you don't need steals anymore, stop putting Leody Taveras in there. Like, always be thinking, where can I move the most? What's going to move the needle the most for me? Not just play your guys, play the right guys. And really, I think if you have a process and you start to question this stuff, you're going to be able to move the needle a lot more than you think. Like I was talking about at the trade deadline in my Yahoo leagues, I've moved up significantly since then because I've been making these targeted pickups and moves, and I've been constructing my lineups so that they emphasize those categories that I can move up the most in, and also not worrying as much. Like, maybe I lose 1 point potentially in saves, but I'm gaining a potential 7 to 8 points in wins and strikeouts. Like, that's fine. I don't need then I don't need my closers there. So just always be thinking about what you're doing. Up until the last 6 weeks, you were kind of more just trying to play your best players and kind of gauge what you need at that time. But then in the last 6 weeks and now in the last couple of weeks from there, you're more and more looking to target certain things because you're only going to be able to move the needle so much, but you can move the needle, especially if people aren't paying attention to the degree that you are. I've said I've been on the bad side of this where I've run out of fab money. And that's the other thing I want to mention too. Make sure you have in fab leagues, I would say like $4 minimum per week. So for the rest of the season, what's that? You said there's 3 more fab weeks or 4?
Yeah, 12, about 3, I think.
3? Okay. So if that's the case, if it's 3, then you want about $12 left. I'm not saying you can't have more than that, but I'm saying that's like bare minimum.
3 more weeks of that.
You are going to see guys get shut down. There's going to be more injuries. There's going to be guys who are called up who get more playing time now. Mediocre veterans on bad teams are going to probably be benched more often now. You need to be ready to pick guys up. And you can get a lot of guys for like $1 here and there. Like I just picked up Pilar last week in some big leagues where Nimmo got injured. Make sure you're staying on top of those injuries. Whenever someone goes down, always ask yourself, who's benefiting from this playing time now? Who's going to get those at-bats? Because especially when they happen on Sunday, people don't have time to react to that news yet. You want to make sure that you're on top of this stuff so that you can get them for cheap and be playing them right away. So, just do all the little things that you can do to help yourself win down the stretch, because I have seen massive gains and losses in the final month. And I'm talking, if you're 20 points out, you're not out of it. Like, you can still make that up if you target the right categories. So just make sure you're targeting the right things to move up in.
And speaking of the devil, my wife has jumped in, so we'll be wrapping this up because we've talked about her enough tonight. But hey, babe, speaking of my wife, like right now, like I think it's super, super important, and I think some people are going to listen and be like, "Oh, I can do some of this stuff," but they're not going to do it in an organized manner. Spreadsheet this out, write it out. There is something different than just looking at the standings, on whatever site you're using, whether it's NFBC or Yahoo or CBS or ESPN or Fantrax, and actually putting it into a spreadsheet, running calculations that tell you are this far away in runs from the next guy and this far away from runs from the guy above that, and behind you as well, right? Make sure you're also looking not just at the people you can catch, but who can catch you. Because that's important. Like if I can't gain any room here in stolen bases, and the next guy's 20 ahead of me. If there are 3 guys behind you within 5 stolen bases, you cannot give up on that category.
Exactly. Yeah, and like you said, write it out. I do it with everything, and I'm a psycho, so I color code everything too. I'll be like, okay, this start is a green start, this start's a yellow start, this is an orange start, this is a red. Like, I will color code everything, and just so that I can quickly look at it and then see, okay, and I'll have all the guys on my team, so like all of the starting pitching on my team, and then I'll have for each league, I'll have all of the potential free agents out there, and then that way I can look and I can see, okay, where do I have green and red, which weeks line up where I need more guys here in green here, and okay, I can't play this guy this week. It's the more you can organize it, the better you're going to do. Like you said, you don't want to just be eyeballing this. You want to be typing it out in a spreadsheet on Excel. It's easy to do. You just got to put in the work. If you put in the work, you're going to be able to pull off some wins here in the last month.
Absolutely. Dave, this has been a fantastic episode. Remind everybody where you can reach on social media, and then if you've got anything else to plug, go ahead.
All right. Yeah. It's been a lot of fun, and I guess we're going to be able to do this every week now. So I'm looking forward to that. So you can find me on Twitter at RunDMCD. That's probably really the best place to find me right now. And I'm always working on stuff, but I'll let you guys know. I'll always put it out on Twitter. I'm hoping that Mr. Jay Callisker will want to do a podcast episode at some point. But at least I'm able to fulfill that regular pod, doing regular pods again with you. So I'm very appreciative.
And you can reach me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. Hear me on this podcast, TGFBI podcast, and the Super on the Bus podcast. I write pretty close to daily over at Fangraphs. I also write at Friends Fantasy Benefits and TGFBI.com. I've got a lot of plans for the off season. And there were some questions tonight that talked about like, hey, who do you think about like this guy? Or like, what about this strategy for 2022? Dave and I are going to focus still on 2021 because like he's been talking the whole time, you can win your leagues, you can move up, and we'll worry about 2022 as, once October hits. But I think we're going to really
time and pods to do in the meantime. So we'll get to those for sure.
And my hope is that Dave and I will record every week throughout the off season to really give everybody a jump on 2022. So we'll get there. If you ask questions about that kind of future stuff, we'll get there. Keep checking back in, but we're going to focus on right here, right now. And I've got some really cool plans, things that are starting to develop some ideas for this pod, for other pods, for other works that I do. So keep tuned on my Twitter where I'll probably be announcing that kind of stuff later on. So
will you be announcing it to me on Twitter as well, or do I get a
you can get a sneak peek behind the curtain because
this is already so much different with Jake, because Jake would literally give me the news like on the pod, like he wouldn't tell me shit going into it, and then it'd just be like, hey, guess what we're doing? And I'm like, oh, are we? Okay, all right.
And typically that's how I operate too. Like I'm one of those people, like people don't realize, like, behind the scenes, like, of Sleeper on the Bus, like, we don't prep anything. Like, the only time I do a rundown ahead of time is when I've got a guest on. So you'll get a lot of that where I'm just gonna throw shit at you because I know you know it, like, right?
Well, I slid into Justin's DMs at like 6 p.m. and I was like, "Hey, are we doing the pod tonight?" And you're like, "Yeah, let's do it."
Yeah,
it's like,
let's go.
So okay, we're just gonna do the show notes now, and I think I was still editing my part of the show notes right up until 10 o'clock when we started to record. So it in many ways it does feel like working with Jake again.
Good, I'm glad. I'm not as pretty as Jake, but it's hopefully I'll be as fun to work with. So. All right. With all that being said, definitely follow Dave on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. Follow at Fantasy Benefits on Twitter. Follow at Rotosaurus on Twitter.
And please let us know any comments and suggestions and what you guys want to hear and what you guys are thinking so far. We're definitely open to hearing from you guys and everything too. So
absolutely. So with that, for Dave and myself, thank you for listening. Enjoy our amazing exit music.
Fun times in Cleveland again. Still Cleveland. Come on down to Cleveland town, everyone. Under construction since 1868. See our river that catches on fire. It's so polluted that all our fish have AIDS. We see the sun almost 3 times a year. This guy has at least 2 DUIs. The flats look like a Scooby-Doo ghost town. Don't slow down in East Cleveland or you'll die. Our economy's based on LeBron James. Buy a house for the price of a VCR. Our main export is crippling depression. We're so retarded that we think this is art. It could be worse though, at least we're not Detroit. We're not Detroit.